Good morning. My name is Beth, Chronister, and I serve here as one of your ministers. I'm here with my colleague, John Luopa, and also joined by Dwight Beckmeyer, our pianist, and Jenny Spence, one of our soloists. And it is good to be here with you this morning. Wherever here might be, we are still gathered together as a community during these strange and uncertain times on this sunny morning in Seattle, Washington. Welcome to the Unitarian Church. Some of you might be wondering right now, I'm sure many of you, about when we might gather again as a community. As we're looking into the uncertainty of what May will look like here in Seattle and in the nation, we've made the decision to continue to keep the building closed throughout the month of May and to continue to be doing our services live streamed as we have been over the past weeks, as well as keeping our community connected through online opportunities. Again, welcome to University Unitarian Church. It is good to be together from wherever you are. I call us to worship this morning with these words from the Reverend Sarah York. We receive fragments of holiness, glimpses of eternity, brief moments of insight. Let us gather them up for the precious gifts that they are, and renewed by their grace, move boldly into the unknown. Welcome to University Unitarian Church. Welcome to worship. Would you please join us now in singing the doxology? The words will be on the screen.
Good morning, friends. The month of April has been set aside, as most of you know, as our annual giving campaign month, and I'd like to thank all of you who have already made online pledges in support of the congregation for the next fiscal year beginning on July 1st. I thank you for your generosity in advance. And for those of you who've not yet made your pledge, we hope that you will do so in the next week or two so that we can begin thinking about our budget for next year. On these Sundays in April, we have been fortunate enough to listen to members of the congregation who have given testimonies as to what the congregation and Unitarian Universalism means in their own lives. And today we have a very special one, actually, from the president of the Unitarian Universalist Association, the Reverend Susan Frederick Gray. She had planned on being with us last month for the dedication of our new building and is looking forward to rejoining us in the fall. But she has a special message for us this morning, not only for us, but for all Unitarian Universalists.
Greetings, dear friends. As your UUA president, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you for supporting your local congregation. I am so proud of the way Unitarian Universalist congregations are responding to this moment. At fraught times such as these, we are reminded how much we need each other, how much we need communities of care, purpose, and spiritual depth. Thank you for your congregation's ministry. This is a time of year when many Unitarian Universalists pledge their financial support through annual congregational pledge campaigns. I want you to know how much your giving matters. I want you to know that you belong in this spiritual community, whatever your financial capacity. We are a people in covenant with one another. To be in covenant means that when you are in need, you are held. Being in covenant also means that in times of crisis, those who can give more do so. We take care of one another in this way, and in turn, we make it possible for our congregation to continue to care for others. A financial pledge is a promise, and making one is an inherently hopeful act. It feels good to give in whatever way we are able. Abundance is everywhere. Across our association, we have remarkable leaders providing worship and inspiration for all ages and life stages. We have incredible leaders providing pastoral care and small group ministry and holding the collective care of our communities. We are gathering in a myriad of new ways. Yes, there are unseen challenges before us, and there is so much we don't know about what's to come. But we do know that we have each other. We have this religious tradition. We have this beloved community. We have the opportunity to lean deeper into our ministry, to be blessed and to be a blessing. Thank you for the ways you are responding with deep ministry in this moment. Thank you for your generosity.
to set our spirits free.
Before I invite you to join me in saying the words we customarily say as ushers come forward to receive the morning offering, I just want to thank you for your ongoing support of the ministries and the mission of this congregation in the life of our wonderful city. Despite all our hardship and challenge that we face these days, the response to the pledge drive has been very encouraging, and I want to thank you again for that. And just a reminder that now that we are not meeting in our customary ways, the ongoing needs and expenses of the congregation continue. So as we begin this last quarter of this year's budget, if you've not yet fulfilled your pledge, we thank you in advance for doing that. So please join me now, friends, in saying the words printed here on the screen. This church is a community of ourselves. Its energy and resources are our energy and resources. Its wealth is what we share. When we contribute to the life of this community, we affirm our lives within it.
Hide me from day's garish eye, while the bee with honeyed thigh, which out of lark doth sing, and thou waters with such consort as they keep, entice the dewy feathered sleep. And let some strange mysterious dream weave at his wings in airy stream of lively portrait yet displayed, softly on my eyelids laid. Then as I wake, sweet music breathe above, about, underneath, sent by some spirit to mortals good, or the
Would you please join me now in the spirit of meditation and of prayer? When the ground shifts or loss strikes and plans lose their imaginary power, that inescapable truth of vulnerability has come home. Chaos has arrived to your door, and even the familiar now feels strange. Wilderness awaits, beckons you forward with uncontrollable beauty and landscapes of uncertainty. And though you try and fight it, somewhere deep you know the only way out is through, and it will change you. As you enter this wilderness of the soul, be patient. Emergence has its own timeline, as does grief. Be exceedingly kind to yourself and others you meet along the way. This will be a warm light by which you navigate. Grab grace wherever it comes by, knowing in contrast the significance of laughter, friendship, forgiveness, gratitude, and calm. And let down your expectations, finding acceptance within the ambiguity as the mystery of the wilderness works away at what you thought you knew. I offer you these words from John O'Donohue, who wrote, "What is being transfixed here is your mind, and it is difficult and slow to become new, to become transfigured. The more faithfully you can endure here, the more refined your heart will become for your arrival into the new dawn." Would you please join me now, adding the silent prayers and intentions of your own hearts? Blessed be, and amen.
when life becomes momentous for us, whether in anticipation of a great happiness or of danger, we often look for some wisdom from somewhere, from someone else who's made it through, and on which we might tie ourselves as to a mast for stability and for reassurance. And one of those sources for me for many, many years now has been both the writing and the poetry of the German-Czech poet Rainer Maria Rilke. When Annie and I were preparing for our wedding ceremony almost 40 years ago now, we looked in one of Rilke's books, maybe familiar to you, called Letters to a Young Poet, which was written, about a century ago now, and was his life advice for a young person starting in the profession he had enjoyed and struggled with for so long. And we used a selection from that book where he talks about love and young people and learning how to love. He describes love as day labor, something that you have to learn every day. And if you think you remember from yesterday just how to do it today, you're going to be mistaken and you're going to have to learn it all over again. For that reason, he said that young people whose life is still beginning don't understand their lives fully, but in time and with practice, their love might come into a very great and a very deep, almost unbearable happiness. And I am lucky and happy enough to say that that advice is true. We live in a momentous time now, too, and the challenge is not a happy one, indeed, but is dangerous. Dangerous times for all of us all over the world. And so again, of course, I went to that same book, Letters to a Young Poet, to find some words of counsel. There he wrote, "We have no reason to mistrust our world, for the world is not against us. Has it terrors? They are our terrors. Has it abysses? Those abysses belong to us. Are there dangers at hand? We must try to love them." Oh my gosh, wow. And if only we arrange our life according to that principle which counsels us that we must always hold on to the difficult, then that which now seems to us most alien will become what we most trust and find most faithful. Well, like a young person anticipating marriage at the age of 25 and listening to Rilke's words, I thought, not sure. And I have the same response to this, although I was proven wrong the first time. How is it that we are able to live with what we dislike? This question seems to run counter to everything we've ever been taught at home and in schools and by the larger culture in general, especially American culture. If we identify something that we dislike or hate, the response should be to get rid of it, to destroy it, or to forget about it and walk away from it. Life isn't meant to be unhappy all the time, so just get rid of it. Move it away, suppress it, avoid it. And so if I say to you this morning that in order to be an authentically spiritual person, you need to learn how to coexist with what you dislike, you might say to me, of course, well, not me. Maybe you, but not me. Yet, I believe that it is an extremely important and even necessary requirement to coexist with what we dislike represents a very advanced form of human understanding. An understanding of what binds all of life together, and when a person is able to do this, she will strengthen and stimulate her soul. Now, stay with me. Soul, strengthen her soul, okay? How does a spiritual person think about the problem of living with what he or she dislikes or hates? It's not a matter of the stiff upper lip or turning the other cheek, because I don't think those methods really work. They're false. Rather, I believe it requires a kind of self-discipline of a different order. And that self-discipline requires of us just a couple of things, okay? The first thing that it requires is living with what we dislike or consider abhorrent is necessary because we know on some level that it is not necessarily abhorrent. It may be abhorrent to us now, but it is not necessarily and always abhorrent. As a matter of fact, it is most often the case that what a person rejects is often the very thing that that person needs. How often has it happened to us, to you, to me, that the work we hate, the community we dislike, the things that distress us most, the relatives we abhor, become later on the very things that are the most important to us. What we would like to push away is part of what will eventually save us. In the 1930s, the United States Chamber of Commerce worked vigorously in lobbying all representatives in Congress to defeat Social Security because they believed that Social Security would destroy the American economy. Okay? So the first thing that a spiritual person needs in this self-discipline is to hold fast to the belief that what may be abhorrent to you right now is not necessarily abhorrent all of the time. And the second thing here is that we will learn how to live with what we hate because we know that an understanding of what is evil is essential in understanding what is good. Creativity is, in part, a very destructive process. Destruction, to be permanent, requires a very complex level of creativity. You cannot have one without the other. Many of us are not conservative politically. Many, not all, many of us are not conservative politically, but we cannot fully appreciate our progressive, we used to say liberal, but that's an old word now, we cannot understand our progressive point of view unless we understand its weaknesses and its growing edges. And what, to our great annoyance, often points out what our weaknesses and growing edges are? Conservatism, you see. You can't have one without the other. You can't have a full understanding of one without the other. That's the second thing that's required in this self-discipline. And third, a spiritual person knows that we can never totally eliminate people or forces that threaten our values. There will always be an adversary. Eliminate one and another one appears. We are never at ease once we vanquish a foe. We're always alert on the next one. Just read any of the plays of Shakespeare for validation on that point. Or, there was a Unitarian Universalist out in his boat fishing when suddenly the Loch Ness Monster rose up out of the lake and attacked his boat. And the monster grabbed the bow of the boat in its huge mouth, flipped the Unitarian Universalist, way up into the air, opened its mouth wide, preparing to catch the guy in his mouth and to swallow him. And as the UU fell towards that huge mouth filled with sharp teeth, without thinking, he said, "Oh my God, help me!" And suddenly, time froze. And as the guy hung there in midair, a huge voice boomed out, "I thought you didn't believe in a personal God on whom you could call in times of crisis." "Give me a break, God," said the Unitarian Universalist. "A minute ago, I didn't believe in the Loch Ness Monster either." And lastly, a spiritual person learns to live with what he or she hates, because to do otherwise is to set a disastrous example. Maybe you remember Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative, which said, whatever decision you make it as if it were binding on all people. Thus, if you take it upon yourself to destroy what you hate, you give the same right to others, and your morality may become someone else's immorality. Why do I call this kind of self-discipline spiritual? It's an uneasy word for a lot of our people. Why isn't it just plain good common sense or self-awareness? Spirituality is not common sense, and it is not self-awareness, and the difference is important. Suppose you have common sense, or suppose you are self-aware. You will then know from your own experience that you've made mistakes, you're fallible, and so others must be too. You give the person you hate the benefit of the doubt. And you might say, look, the person I hate so much acts this way for reasons I don't fully understand. And thus, you define and you distance yourself from this person. You disengage from this person, from this issue. You cut the relationship that you have with this, you see, and you break a vital connection, and then you have to live with only your own limited misinformation about the situation. Spirituality doesn't end in such a situation, you see. It recognizes that even if you could have complete self-awareness and total information, you would still be wrong to distance yourself from what you do not like or deny your dependency on what you dislike. Why? Because this kind of an attitude of liking and disliking and hating and loving is basic to life and to living. The greatest of spiritual teachers in all the traditions of the world have understood this in their efforts not only to understand and appreciate themselves, but other people and life itself. Limited by one's finite capacities, we have not yet been able to understand how there can be evil in a good world. Indeed, the mythologies and theologies of all religions have made of evil, or sometimes personified as Satan, a force within the spiritual realm itself, you see. And perhaps someday some of us might be able to perceptively confront ourselves with the fact that vast, dark places make up part of our own selves, in addition to infinite possibilities for good. And that not only do both of these forces dwell within us, but that they must and that they must be in relationship to each other. So you see, spirituality is deeper than common sense and self-awareness, because it not only acknowledges what we dislike, but insists that what we dislike must coexist with what we like. Indeed, what you don't like may be a very useful guide to learning what you truly love. Well, how can this be of help to you, those who are listening this morning? Well, I think it can help in a couple of ways. If you accept the inevitability of this tension, if you do, you won't try to resolve conflict in a spurious way. So much of us don't like conflict. We hate it. We run from it. We have a visceral reaction to it. Our most common response is to flee from conflict. Yet conflict is a signal that you are alive. No conflict, you're dead. If you destroy your enemy, you will still fight with anxiety. If you sell out to that person, keep your old head low, you will never lift your head high, and you will not be happy. If, on the other hand, you choose to steer your life between the likes and dislikes, loves and hatreds, to remain constructively engaged while preserving your own integrity, you will discover a new sense of pride in yourself, or as the great African-American preacher Howard Thurman used to say, you will give yourself an opportunity for self-validation. You will find your attitude so resilient and your understanding changing and yourself growing. I love the analogy of a sailboat here. A sailboat makes headway against the wind because of the resistance of its sail to the wind. It must not set itself against the wind too much, or it will keel over. But neither must it oppose the wind too little, for then it'll go nowhere. It must set itself on a course of firm but flexible opposition in order to move forward. This is not easy. When you decide, if you do, to coexist with what you don't like, you take on a very demanding assignment. Most of us would rather forget about it. Most of us have forgotten about it for most of our lives. And we will continue to live dull and stagnant lives as we have in days past. We would rather be content with the muddling mediocrity of our own lives. Who needs more tension? Especially today. What you are telling us, John, is tough on the emotions and tough on the stomach. And even saints get ulcers. Well, I'm not a saint, but I am acquainted with ulcers. But I also know that if you come to this church, you attend, you listen, you participate in the life of this congregation, and if you get no invitation to live a more abundant life, you might as well stay home. Well, you're doing that now. Well, you might as well not be a member of UUC, okay? So are there some practical, everyday methods of dealing with these tensions, of living with what we dislike? Let me, in closing, just offer a few. Some of them will be convincing to you. Some of them you're already doing. Some of them they have no interest at all. One thing that you might do is to recognize that your tensions are normal, perfectly natural. I would wager that just about anyone you would confide in, by telling them your struggles, would say, "Oh my gosh, you too? You live with the same thing?" Your fears are shared by many people, and recognition of this fact invariably reassures spiritual people. Another thing, secondly, discipline yourself to accept the tension, and it is a discipline. Living with what you dislike is not a matter of doing what comes naturally. Most of the time, we summon much too much energy to live with people, ideas, or conditions that we find very disturbing. But you can do this. And each time you do this, you can take pride in your effort. It's kind of like what Rilke said about loving. He called it day labor. As a 25-year-old who knew nothing about what I was getting into by getting married, I thought, what silliness. Look, every month I will improve until in about 5 years I'll be amazing, okay? Totally wrong. Day labor. You pick it up again in the morning. You learn how to do it patiently. Maybe you'll learn a little bit for the next time, but you have to keep doing it over and over, whether you're 25 or 45 or 65 or 95. I know there are some of you out there who are 95. You can do it. Third tactic, make yourself part of the solution. Too many of us become immobilized by what we dislike and become kind of terminally cranky. I've been there. I think as we grow older, we have more of a tendency to turn the clock back. We're plagued with thoughts like, well, if only I had done such and so long ago. If only I could restore the original conditions. If only I had said something else in that moment. These are difficult temptations to resist, all excuses, but spiritual people find it easier as they see themselves as part of the solution to the new situation rather than to the old problem, by becoming a part of the solution to the issue at hand. And a spiritual person says, my eyes are in front of my head. I'm living forward. I'm not going to die looking backward. And lastly, and there are others, of course, that you can think about, find something small and concrete to do, especially if you're homebound and going crazy. Plant the garden, clean the garage, pick up some litter, make sure you vote, write a check, send a text, make a phone call, fix the door, put flowers or food on someone's doorstep, say, I'm sorry, make amends. Intelligent people, like us, of course, often think these are trivial, silly little things, but for a moment, it takes you away from the big, universal, and terribly complicated problems that concern all of us. And besides, it might make someone happy. So, what you don't like doesn't have to hurt you. Indeed, learning to live with what you don't like may become a very useful guide, not only in your attempt to love better, but to living an abundant life. Hold to the difficult, Rilke said, as a way of dealing with the tough times. Don't let it go. Don't push it away. Hold on to it. Wrap your arms around it. The world is not against us, but our responses to the world at times very much work against us. Life can often be difficult, not always, but very often that it can be. That's only one side of it. Don't shortchange yourself. Embrace it, deepen, and maybe you too may find life abundant. Amen. Our closing hymn this morning is Spirit of Life. You will see it here on the screen. It's a short song, but we're going to sing it twice this morning. Spirit of Life. Music is a very important part of the life of the congregation, as we all know, and we are blessed indeed to have several choirs, a loft choir, intergenerational choir, and the bell choir. And I know we have all been in mourning because we haven't heard these beautiful voices enhancing our worship experience as we do each week here at UUC. Slowly we are bringing that back into our worship services as we can safely, and a delight today for me, I know, and for all of us to hear Jenny Spence and of course our incomparable Dwight Beckmeyer. Thanks too to David Owens and Byron Christad, our tech crew, for these services, and for Nick Barnard, who's leading the Zoom experience this morning. And we remind all of you, of course, of the Zoom coffee hour rooms to follow the service. You can find information to link quickly with that at the very end of this service this morning. When I remember what it was like so long ago now to fall in love with another classmate at the Harvard Divinity School and get married, there was another thing, many things happening in the school at the time, and one of them was a very large women and religion program that started there at Harvard in the late 70s. This was an enormously high energy group of professional women, brilliant women who were reclaiming their place in the life of the church. And one of those women was Carolyn McDade, who wrote the hymn Spirit of Life. I'll confess that more and more over the years, it's a song that grows deeply in my own soul and spirit. And I think I told you that it really kept it for me when I was in the Philippines some years ago now, visiting Universalist congregations there in the rural Philippines. And as we would approach each village, all the children were standing in the middle of the road singing Spirit of Life in English. Spirit of life, come unto us all and sing in our hearts all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in our hands, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold us all close, and wings set us all free. Spirit of life, come to us, be in us, be us. Amen.